bom dia to everybody. Let me see if I can say. Grande prazer estar aqui com vocês no Brasil. Kind of. I'm trying. But don't worry about not speaking very good English. I don't speak very good English either. I am not from Greece. I am from Greece. I'm not from England. I am in the UK now many years. But still, many times, I don't understand if a native speaker speaks. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I need a translation myself. There are different pronunciations, different cultures. You have somebody living in England from the north, from the south, or from Australia, from New Zealand, or a Greek speaker speaking English. That's another level of difficulty. My name is the first level of difficulty is CHATZIEFSTATHIOU. I am from Greece originally. I live in the UK for more than 20 years. And I came to England as Erasmus student. This is when you come, somebody from Europe goes somewhere else in Europe. When UK was still part of the European Union, still now Erasmus comes back into the UK, but that's a different story. So I went to ancient Olympia in 1998 for the first time, and I was very impressed with the spirit of Olympism, with the spirit of friendship, the spirit of peace. But I knew that I was missing something. I wanted to also be more critical. I saw the good side of things, but I knew that there were kind of challenging sides of things, and that's why I came to England to do a master's. That was on education, but my master was on Olympic education. I was trying to understand teachers' perceptions about values, not specifically on the Olympics, but more about values. And then I moved on and I did a PhD at a university in England called Loughborough University, which is quite famous for sport. And there I studied more with Professor Ian Henry and Dr. Eleni Theodoraki, who is now professor as well, Eleni. I did a research about the values. I wanted to understand the Olympic values. And England and the way that the research is done in the UK was very different than what I had learned in Greece. Because in Greece, we were doing more, it was more books. We were reading books as an undergraduate student. I was reading books, I had some references, but it was more about relying a lot on one author, what they say, relying a lot on what your professor will tell you in the classroom. And that was many years ago, 20 years ago. And then when I came to the UK, it was all about going to the library and finding academic papers and reading academic papers and interrogating everything, which is now the case also in Greece. Undergraduate, you can see that there is a lot of there is a lot in Greece. So, sorry, this I sent you the wrong. Can you go? I sent you the wrong slides. I'm really sorry. Do you mind? Because I want to send you the ones that definitely are the correct.
No worries. You can do that. You can do that.
Because I can talk about the digital transformation, but that's not our.
No worries. We wait.
It's this one. I'll need to send it 1 second. I'll tell you why I have the digital, because I work for the Global Esport Federation as well. I am the vice chair of Youth and Culture Commission.
Yeah,
And
I've seen your research groups is all about human rights and safeguarding, right?
yes. Now I'll come to this, how we came to that. So I'm sending you now the correct ones.
Okay, no worries.
Sent. So I started doing more about the values, and then it helped me a lot to understand that even if you are a very optimistic person about the Olympic Games, it's very good to be critical. Not necessarily critical like criticizing in a bad way, but more about developing a critical friendship, in a sense, kind of perspective, where you say, okay, nothing is perfect. The Olympic Games is definitely not perfect. How can we make the experience better for everybody involved? And then through this process, I did my PhD in the UK. And then many years later, I started developing more a very big interest into safety, into human rights, into athletes' rights. And that is then how I developed a research group that is on issues of safe sport and human rights, which became an official Olympic Studies Research Center a year and a half ago. And I'm very proud of this. So I am a professor at the university, professor of applied Olympic studies, and the director of the Olympic Studies Research Center that is in Canterbury Christ Church University. I'm also the director of research for the organization that is called Safe Sport International, that is dealing about safe sport and athletes and rights as well. And I'm also the vice chair of the Education, Youth and Culture Commission of the Global Esport Federation, again dealing a lot about children's rights and safe esport. So I feel very fortunate that the things that I wanted to do when I started as a young student in Olympia, I feel like I am really doing them and contribute to the field. And it's a great pleasure when I have the opportunity to talk to different research groups like yourself, where we can all together think, reflect, critically evaluate, critically reflect on different and challenging kind of issues. So this paper that I have written, and it's we will discuss today. My co-author is Simon Roth, who is recently became professor of sport diplomacy in Leeds Beckett University. And how this came up is that we talk a lot about the Olympics. We talk a lot about the challenges of the Olympics. One of the biggest challenges, okay, if we go back in time in terms of the Olympics, if we want to think what are big challenges, do you want to tell me any of the big challenges of the Olympics? Any barriers, any problems, any bad press? What is bad in the news about the Olympics? What was bad in the news about Brazil Olympics? What was bad in the news about Athens Olympics? Any ideas?
Don't be shy. What are the problems we have here from Rio, for example?
See, if you want to translate in Portuguese and then translate
Course.
to me.
Ok, we'll do it. Ela está perguntando se vocês, quais os desafios que vocês veem sobre os Olympics. A Gabriel just said gentrification as one of the problems related to organizing the Olympics. Who else? Quem mais pode dizer dos desafios? Eu posso traduzir de volta. Inequalities.
Yeah, inequalities. This goes back from the very beginning of the modern Olympics, with the gender issues, with the controversy, with women's Olympics, with regional games, with different kind of continents, militarization, excellent, in terms of like the militarization is an excellent point. Even if we go back into the modern Olympics, because the modern Olympics, although we think that is a peace project, which is in many respects, of course, now more, the modern Olympics started from a very much an imperialistic kind of conflict, because you have the French Empire, you have the British Empire. The British were quite fit as an army. They had muscular Christianity, which is about athletics, doing sport and values in sport, and the army was very much kind of nurtured into that, and they were very fit. However, within France, at the time, there was a lot of focus on classical studies, on Latin studies, and the army apparently it was not, and the young people they were not as fit as in Britain, because the focus on physical activity and on physical education was not as priority as it was in the UK. So Coubertin, he was employed from the French state to find a way to make the young people more fit in France. But this was a very much kind of a militaristic promise, in the sense that can we create a fit youth for a fit army, because we were in the era of imperialism. So this militarization is very much in the fabric of the first Olympics even, and of course later they became much more about peace and about friendship, and a lot of Coubertin's writings are more about peace, of course. But the militarization has been connected with the Olympics. Olympic legacies. There are a lot of controversies about Olympic, like how can we create an Olympic legacy, and can Olympic legacies be created in a way that is not at the cost for the people in the country. I'll tell you some other kind of human rights possible contest. I saw the popping up your answers, but I cannot see them right now. Where can I find the answers? Where to see them? Is there a chat? I don't see a chat.
Can you open the chat? It's in the right side down
Let me
your
see.
screen.
I don't see. Okay, let me. Yeah, it is. Okay, I'll be an expert on Google Meet after this session.
No problem.
We use a lot. Usually, the States use Zoom. UK, and within universities, we use Teams. So, okay, now I can see that. Let me go back. So we have displacement of people, inequalities, the cost, militarization, promises not completed. Absolutely. Olympic legacy in terms of like the effects of, in order to produce Olympic legacy, the processes to produce Olympic legacy, what can be at the cost, like gentrification, can be a financial burden to the people. So all these things are really surrounding the games. So let's go to the next slide and see what I put in here. So why this debate matters? Why is it so important to actually talk a lot about Olympic Games and human rights? Because these are very much connected, and especially when it comes to some of these, as you said, in terms of legacies, for example, they can have some kind of positive impacts, but also some kind of counter negative impact. So a big question to ask is, what do the Olympic Games really represent today? Is it a celebration of humanity, or is it a performance of power? Is it one or the other, or can be both, or can be many more things? So when we talk about Olympics, we talk about politics, we talk about identity, we talk about power, and increasingly we talk more about human rights. And in my research, I just wanted to understand, because all my work and my PhD was focused on the values. So then I wanted to say, I knew the very complex politics about who is going to host the games, who is going to apply and be a candidate to host the games, and all this all this kind of complex kind of interests, political interests, financial interests. So I wanted to understand this kind of a trajectory, let's say, from ideals to accountability. how can those ideals, that is the rhetoric of the games, really resonate to accountable Olympic Games? So we can talk a lot about a paradox. I don't know if this is my next slide or yes. So we can talk about the paradox. First of all, the mega events, and especially the Olympics, they can unite us. They bring us together. And that was the biggest vision that Coubertin had. They can also inspire us. The Olympic and Paralympic values are values of humanity, are values of excellence, respect, friendship, are really like real tangible values that we all understand, and they can inspire us, and they can create really nice, very memorable global moments of giving. We can have fun. We can enjoy seeing not just the athletes of our nation, but athletes who are excelling, events that bring together, like the opening ceremony, the closing ceremony. They are celebratory events. However, they can also create some tensions. So they can displace communities. Some of them, you already mentioned them into the chat. They can exploit labor. They can restrict freedom with surveillance and new technologies and all this kind of surveillance, and a lot of debates about this. So it is almost like, the question is, how can something that is so inspiring also do harm? This is the biggest paradox here. How can something that is really so global in many ways can also be so exclusive in other ways and harmful in terms of human rights? Is it? And how can we make sure that we mitigate these kind of challenges for keeping the inspiration into some kind of actionable inspiration and not just only conceptual? So I would like to ask you a question. Is when you think of Rio 2016, first of all, it was 10 years ago. Many of you are very young, so you must have experience by being in school, I suppose, at that time, young in school. So when you think of Rio 2016, you can either say or write it. What does it come first in mind? The first thing that comes in mind when you think of Rio 2016.
For those who can't understand, maybe, quais são o que você pensa, a primeira coisa que vem à mente quando você pensa no Rio 2016, ela perguntou a vocês. Vocês podem escrever, you can write, or you can also open your mic and say something.
Oh, a big bill.
Good. High expenses. What else, guys? You're not that shy. Vocês não são tímidos assim, né? Vamos.
The first thing that comes into your mind. Okay.
Janice said my brother, because her brother is a weightlifter and he was an athlete in Rio.
Amazing. So good.
And program for Olympic education in the Rio de Janeiro is big example for all the countries. Is Transforma Rio, the names for program in Portuguese.
So there is a mixture, I say. Money in a bad way, I suppose. The removal of people from the Villa Autodromo.
Yeah, Villa Autodromo is a neighborhood, a very vulnerable neighborhood that was removed.
The favelas?
Yeah, there was displacement because they wanted to build facilities there. So that was the big removal that we had here.
So you can translate this, the taste the aftermath taste, which means that, you eat. Tell me a Brazilian good food. Which one is a very not necessarily a good food? Let's say you eat something, okay, and then after you eat it, it leaves a taste to your mouth. What kind of taste does the Olympic Games in Brazil has left into your mouth? Bitter, sweet, bittersweet, both, sour. What kind of taste?
Quais sabores deixa para vocês? Doce, amargo ou agridoce? Que tipo de sabor o Rio deixou aqui para nós? Bittersweet for some. For Carlos, it was a sweet taste.
And I can see what Victoria, would you like to tell us a bit more about this? This is very important. So how this concept changed after the Rio Games?
So I was working in Rio de Janeiro at the time. I have 19 years old or 20, I don't know. And was very difficult time because Rio was very chaotic, because we have a lot of politicized. We changed our political way of seeing stuff in the middle of the Rio. So we had a lot of debates inside of Rio. I was volunteer in FIFA no, in FINA, that
Okay.
was a swim. So people inside of Rio de Janeiro, inside of Barra, that was working there, they were very happy, but they have a lot of concerns about why was there. It was the same thing that happening in World Cup. I was working in the World Cup too, and was the same. But in World Cup was stronger. This bittersweet thing.
So, do you think that after the games in Rio, the people felt a bit more united or less united? What is your kind of feel?
That's a little bit strange, but I feel it in the time that it was a little bit more strength, and that's what we have right now, because the World Cup and also in the Rio Olympic Games, we had this union of feelings, of concerns about our country. So we try to demonstrate. And after the World Cup, after the Rio, this mega event here in Brazil, we settle apart, because all we feel have two big feelings about these mega events. One, that we hate, was very chaotic, very difficult, that have anything better, and that was corruption. All and then we see Bolsonaro have strength and everything, and another movement that say, okay, we have this difficult time, we have this time that we have spent a lot of money, but also we have some implementations, and we can be better than that. It's not all option. We can solve this in another way. I felt that the mega events create these two opposite poles in the.
Yeah. And Victoria, I think I don't know if it goes cut or you wanted to say something more.
No. Is that?
Thank you, Victoria. And this is really, I have the feeling that the sense that these kind of very contradictory, almost polarized kind of reactions of people's perceptions happen almost in every Olympics. There are people who are very much advocates and happy that the Olympics take part, or even after the Olympics, the aftermath, how they feel about it, and others who are really don't like it. Don't like the. I was in Paris, for example. People were complaining about the traffic, about the cost, about the way France was represented in the opening ceremony. Even like lots of different kind of contradictory kind of perceptions. And I'm from Greece, and with Athens 2004 Olympic Games and Paralympics, there was again lots of people who said, why do we need, there was a lot of pride, especially because of the heritage of the games and what it means for the Greeks specifically to host the games in their country. But then a lot of the financial kind of dimension, the utilization of facilities after the games and the legacy issues became really big. So exactly that field that you mentioned is very similar, I think, in many of the games. You almost have no games that there is only positive kind of attitude of the people. It's just that some games have even more protest than others. And I think in Rio particularly, because of the impact that the games had and the political difficulties with the leadership of the government within Brazil at that time, created an even bigger bittersweet kind of taste. So I think this is also interesting in terms when we see this the Olympic paradox, the Olympic ideology paradox within the history. If we go back in the history of the games, we will see this kind of polar that we mentioned, polarized kind of reality. It is in the games from the history. So from one side, we can talk about human development, we can talk about values, we can talk about peace, we can talk about equality, universality. And then at the same time, in the history of the games, women were not part of the games. Racial hierarchies about white, not white people, and colonization and how it affected West and non-West. So it's very important to understand that Olympism is historically constructed, and the reactions to the Olympic Games are also socially constructed. So we can have different kind of perceptions and views. So the Olympic Games did not start as a universal kind of event. They became global, which is different, and gradually they become more inclusive. But universality comes always in tension with particularism, and it's a very important. So if we go to the next slide to see how then these kind of tensions, we can also see them within the context of human rights. So this kind of summarizes the examples I have given into my paper. So you have the type of harm. Some of them some of those listed here, you already mentioned them in the chat. Forced evictions, that is removal from homes, like the favelas, demolition of neighborhoods, gentrification that happened in London, because Stratford, where the Olympic Stadium was built, was in an area where it was quite deprived. And then gentrification was caused because the rental prices, the house prices skyrocketed because of the kind of development project as part of the Olympics in this part of London. Then we have restriction of freedom of movement, opinion expression. This became really big in France because the technologies were even more advanced, and there was a lot of surveillance for the fear of terrorism, because of all the political situation that was kind of happening, and the protests within the country and in Paris, and the strikes in the underground. So this was also very much many debates about human rights there. Then intimidation and arrest of journalists, like how journalists feel like they have been The freedom of expression is being limited, and this happens also in not just in the Olympics but also in other mega events like in the World Cup. Discriminatory laws or actions, how things cannot don't necessarily kind of reinforce equality, and there are politics targeting different kind of groups. And now, as we are going towards Los Angeles Games, there are so many debates about issues of human rights in terms of discriminations, and this is always part and parcel with the Olympic Games, I would say. Even in many different countries, I wanted to say that even in London there were a lot of different there were different types of scandals, but there were debates about security, for example, and the safety of London Games. There was a big scandal with it was the G4. It was a specific company that had been employed, and then just a few weeks just before the games, they couldn't deliver the number of the security officers that they had promised, and then the army had to be kind of brought to the games, and there was a lot of chaotic kind of, as you mentioned, chaotic. It was pretty chaotic a few weeks before the games. Then the games ran smoothly, and everybody has a very good taste of the games, especially of the Paralympics, that they had a record kind of sales of tickets for the Paralympic Games. But we can see that the history of the Olympics is very paradoxical. The feelings about having the Olympics in a country is very paradoxical. And this is also translated into human rights, which is also paradoxical and not always promoted, but can also be undermined within the Olympics. Next one. So sports diplomacy and the best lens. So we can see that when we talk about human rights, we can talk about potential harms. So these kind of forced evictions, labor exploitation, and all this. And as we said before about Brazil, the social inequality was very much exposed as part of these games. So where now, in all these kind of tensions, sport diplomacy comes. So sport diplomacy comes and can operate as power, can operate as image, can operate as influence, and it can also shape how nations are seen by the rest of the world, and also, more importantly, how they want to be seen. So sport diplomacy comes in here that mega events is not just a stadium, but they are stages for the global perception, and they exercise soft power in presenting these nations into the best way possible. But there is another term that I'm using in the paper, if you want to go to the next slide, which is sport washing. Sport washing is very different than sport diplomacy. Sport diplomacy is more about is negotiation, is the different pillars of the sport diplomacy. However, sport washing is more about how can we use sport to improve reputation, to hide problems, to control and manipulate the image of a nation. And it can work. And why it can work? Because sport is very emotional. It can make us feel very proud. So because sport has that emotional weight and emotional power, it can be kind of almost hijacked from different regimes, like in the Nazi Olympics, for example. That was a very radical example of sport washing, and audiences really want to believe it. They really want to believe. So there is vulnerability from the audience because of the emotional power of sport, and manipulation from the different political kind of stakeholders that they can invest in that. So I'm going to ask you one question is, do you think fans, so people who are watching the games, do you think that the fans care about human rights when they just watch sport? Do they think of human rights, or it doesn't even come to their mind? You can translate.
Sure.
Yes.
Se vocês acham que os fãs e quem assiste esportes realmente se importam sobre direitos humanos quando eles vão ver os jogos, etc.
I don't think they think about the human rights, because usually the average fan likes to think about the separation between sport and politics. At least in Brazil, we have this cultural tradition that you like to separate these two fields, sport and politics.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's very good answer, Carlos. Because many people, and also people involved in sport, and who understand sport, who work for sport, this kind of division and separation, this kind of autonomy of sport can also make them think, let's not think, this is not just about sport. Anyone else? Any other views on that? Do you, when you watch sport, do you think of human rights? When you watch your favorite, like a national, let's talk about World Cup. You watch World Cup. Brazil is playing. Do you ever think about human rights? Yes, Gabriel.
I think that is as Carlos explained. Sometimes people in Brazil try to split politics and sports, but at the same time, I think people in Brazil and fans, sport fans, have different visions of human rights, and we have this polarization too. This political polarization in Brazil about what's the meaning of human rights. An example can be about the theme of trans people in sports, for example. It's very common in Brazil, and people understand the trans inclusion as sometimes people understand that the politicals to ban the politics to ban trans people is a type of human rights protection, and the other way people ask, no, it's not this. People ask, actually trans people needs to be inside the sports. It's the human right, know. So this type of discussion happen a lot.
Yes, thank you, Gabriel. Very, very good points, and it is like that. And I just want to also bring up into this that there is a debate about, do human rights exist? Is human rights a Western neoliberal construct which frames human rights in a very specific way, or we can? It is a more kind of universal. Are there universal human rights? So there is a big debate into this of perception of what is a human right. Clarice, and then is Vittoria. Now sorry, I may have missed one before. If anyone raised their hand and I missed it, now I'm becoming more familiar with how it
It's
appears.
Clarice.
Please tell me now. Now I got it where it comes. Okay, Clarice.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it depends, because if the athletes protest for human rights at the games, for example, I think also is the make fans reflect about the human rights. I new points, but I have my opinion about this.
Sorry, can you repeat? If the athletes
if the athletes protest for human rights in the games, for example, in protest or manifestation, the athletes, and that also they make fans reflect about the human rights because the athletes protest and the fans, what the case
I
is
see what
for.
you mean. Okay. But you know that the athletes cannot protest about human rights during the games. I mean, they because of the eligibility rule 50, they are not allowed to protest about human rights as part of the Olympic Games. They can do it after the games. They are not allowed to do it on the podium. They are not allowed to do it during their event. So there are lots of kind of, and this is another kind of discussion where, because of this separation of sport and politics, that's why this rule is there, that athletes cannot protest about human rights during the games as part of when they are doing their sport. There was, I don't remember the name of the athlete. There was a Ukrainian athlete, I think, that he was wearing now in the Winter Olympics a helmet where it was kind of depicting pictures where it was about the Ukrainian, people who
I
died
don't
in the
remember
war.
the name, but
don't
I
remember.
see the protest.
And he was disqualified. So this kind of because of sport division between sport and politics. But even saying even a statement that sport is not political, it's a political statement. We need to understand that this is it's a political statement to say sport is separate from politics. And when a government is supporting the games, that's a political reality. So for me, in my own work, I say that this kind of sport division with politics, or the autonomy of sport, have to be really unpacked with a lot of caution and critical lenses, because this autonomy of sport can also be quite negative in many ways, like in safeguarding, for example. This autonomy of sport, where we say, oh, no, sport is separate, can also create some kind of opening it up into practices that are not safe, that if there was no autonomy of sport, there would be a kind of maybe less complicated involvement of the state in some of those cases. So maybe not. It's more kind of just something that we need to debate. Is autonomy of sport a reality? Is autonomy of sport a positive kind of development for lots of challenges surrounding the games? And is sport really separate from politics? So these kind of things are a lot of, to reflect on. But I'll go to Vittoria.
Hi. What I thought I see in the Winter Olympic Games, and also in the last World Cup and some events that's happening right now. I'm working with integrity here in Brazil.
Okay.
So
you work with the integrity unit of
bad integrity, because we have a regulation, a new regulation in the last year that happened here in Brazil. And what I saw here is something that I'm starting to see in the whole picture in Latin America. And I saw that the human rights is something that is connecting with bad. I know that is a little bit strange, but
I understand what you mean. I know exactly what you mean, actually.
Yes, what I'm starting to see right now is the influencers, the social media right now, is they are connecting the betting, how you can betting here with the human rights. If you have the history of these athletes, you have the connection with these athletes. These athletes say, I will be the best. I will try to see I will be the representation of the best history. And then the back thing is trying to connect them with this human right aspect of how to be the best, and how you will bet for these athletes because they have the history, they have this human right to have the connection with the integrity, and they will be the better project to you to bet in these athletes in the betting system. So I'm right now I see that I have a little bit changes what is human rights to Olympic game and sports because of social media. I don't know right now what of the whole picture, but I know that is the betting, the political stuffs that happen in the world right now, they are changing the perspective in the social media with what is human rights in sports. What is what is how we see the human rights. And also I am seeing that the elite athletes, they are not always in the big pictures right now. We have like the amateur league also. The amateur league, they are putting their stories in the social media, and they are changing also the perspective what is human rights in the sports, what we see is a value in sports. So that is what I'm searching, and I see the changes.
Thank you. This is an excellent perspective that you bring into here, Victoria, and this is very much linked with the ambiguous and the vague kind of interpretations of what integrity is, and how, in some respects, it connects with human rights. Then, when it comes to safeguarding, they are considered separately, say sport. So, exactly these kind of layers that you are bringing here now in this discussion goes into a very core issue right now in terms of like what counts as integrity, what counts as corruption, what counts as safeguarding. Is it what is anti-doping? Is it integrity? Is it safeguarding? So all these kind, and this is very much reflected, as you said, into social media, and can also be used accordingly to change the narrative every time. So this is really an important point. And this is something that we in our Olympic Studies Research Center, we are investigating now. We have PhD candidates who are really looking into these kind of issues about integrity, and where does, like these kind of the slippage that exist within this kind of different definitions, and how can also be used differently from social media, as you said. So I will move on to the next slide, because we can see how this kind of image management and the diplomacy kind of management, and the more extreme cases of sport washing, we can see this in history. And I mentioned this into my paper. We can see this in ancient Greece, that it was distraction from war. Or we can see in 1936 in Berlin, that was a propaganda. We can see in modern Olympics, in different cases, that it was image management. Like for example, I will give an example of Russia, of Sochi games. So what is changing is the tools, can be social media, it didn't exist in the past, but the logic remains. So that is very important to understand, that this image management and the powerful use of sport, because of its emotional weight, is there. It has always been there, because many times we romanticize the past. We say, "Oh, look how nice it was. This never happened in ancient games, or this never happened in the first Olympics. Oh, now there is so much corruption." No, if we really go and see that in the history, the logic was always there. It's just the different tools that exist. So if we go to slide 8 now, yes. I don't know why I see. Do you also see it? It has come like a double. I don't know why. Now I can see it. So there have been different reforms, and there is always this kind of statement that sport is a human right, but there are human rights clauses, there have been anti-corruption reforms, and there has been a global pressure. So what is new now is that from the image management that we used to have, we actually move and we shift into an accountability pressure, which is different. We didn't have this accountability pressure in the past. And we have now, in each Olympic Games, that each edition of the Games, they need to have human rights, to comply with human rights, to provide reports, to align with these human rights clauses. So this is something that is is new. We need to understand and to appreciate that this is a shift to an improvement. And we can see this since 2020 in the previous Olympics, and but even more now. Next one. So I think we are in a critical moment, and we need to be honest here. The system is changing, the clauses are being added, the Olympic Committee is scrutinizing much more with formal clauses and all that. The candidates host cities in terms of human rights, and there is often under pressure. So the key question is are things really changing? How can things become better? And also it's important to understand that what also happens is that we have what we call in our paper human rights legacies, which is that out of these clauses and out of these kind of changes in the system, we do have changes in the law, like what happened with Qatar, for example. In the World Cup, things changed, the labor laws changed. So bringing the Olympic Games or major sport events in communities that may have some kind of challenging human rights, or even if they don't have challenging human rights, but there are debates about human rights within a nation, the Olympic Games can leverage, can act as a lever for introducing different laws or for freedom of expression. So you do have a negative side that we mentioned before, but there is also a window there to lever positive human rights legacies. And that is what I wanted to bring. I'm always, as I said, a critical friend. I'm always speaking about, like, I want to see the honest and transparent and balanced view of challenges and opportunities. And I can see that there is also space for an opportunity here for human rights legacies, positive legacies. And next one. So I will finish with this and then we can have some more conversation, is that I can see it's very important that you call me to discuss this paper rather than any other paper. This paper is close to my heart because it opens up this kind of debate about human rights. Has always been, debatable, and the sport and politics debatable. However, I feel like especially now, this paper was written before the gender policy of the IOC, and there has been even more now debates about human rights. We can discuss this if you want, we can discuss something more, but I feel that this attention to human rights, and where we watch sport as fans, but also as sociologists, social scientists in sport, should always bring into our kind of front of our mind the human rights issues. And it's not an easy territory. It's not something easy for us all to agree with. I'm sure even now we can have different kind of perceptions on exactly the same issues. And imagine when you open this up to so many different cultural paradigms, so many nations, so many different values, and so many different interpretations of cultural norms and human rights. So I will stop here in terms of the presentation, but we can carry on, and you tell me, what do you think where we are now? Do you think we are in a good point in history of human rights in the major sport events? What needs to be done? What is missing? What are the good things that happen? What needs to be done?
Thank you, Dikaia. That was an amazing presentation, and also we had chances for interactions. Let me just check about your schedule. Is it okay if we go up until 10:30, or do you have?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we have time for a round of questions. So raise your hands that I'm moderating If you need help with translation, just write your questions in the chat box right on the right side of the meeting. And let me see a round of questions, guys, about the paper. Raise your hands.
Gente, eu acho que ela saiu, hein?
Oh, no, ela saiu.
Eu também achei.
Eu acho.
Eu acho que ela caiu. Ela caiu, provavelmente.
Ela vai.
Ó, gente, me manda um papel aí, um paper aí. Me manda um
Gente,
papel
ela
aí.
saiu, ó. Juro.
Ah, você não tem o paper? Gabriel tem? Manda aí, Gabriel, para Vitória.
Coitada,
Vou te mandar no WhatsApp, Vitória.
Valeu!
Eu sei que vocês têm perguntas, hein? Fiquem tímidos. Quem já quer desenrolar no inglês? Eu acho que ela deu uma excelente mensagem logo no início de dizer que ela também não fala inglês como primeira língua, né? Que ela desenvolveu e que não tem por que a gente ficar preocupado com a pronúncia perfeita, com a escolha de palavras perfeitas. Quem ainda não está preparado para o desafio pode escrever a pergunta, mesmo que seja em português, do lado, que eu tento traduzir. She's back. You're muted.
My Google crashed, so I joined from my Safari. So that's okay. Yes.
Oh, good.
I'm open here to have a conversation, please.
Nice. People are here preparing themselves. I was encouraging them to ask questions. So a round of questions, please. Okay, Vitória is ready. Meanwhile, all people can, organize your ideas and ask questions. You can write them down. And if you're ready, just raise your hand, then I'm following the order here. Okay. So Vitória and Gabriel.
How you see the changes of the values of human rights?
Sorry, I did not. You broke for a moment. How do I see?
How you see the change of values of human rights? Seeing with the North from Europe vision, North America vision, and here Latin America vision, because I feel that it has a global South have a little bit different values, human rights values, and perspective as the North global that they have changed. So I want to understand what's your thoughts about this change of values that we are already passing right now with Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and how this is connecting with the Olympic Committee and these federations, big federations.
Yes, that's a very big question, which is amazing. But in terms of to really, in order to answer this, I would have to really see the different local context to have a good feel of that, because I don't want to generalize by only having some snapshots from the media. I have a PhD student who has just finished her PhD, and she's from South America. She's from Colombia, Catalina Melendro Blanco, and I sent her a message. I said, please join us, because she hadn't seen the invite, and she said, oh, I'll try, but she may not say. And the PhD that she did was on gender-based violence in Colombia. And it was by interviewing stakeholders of sport in Colombia. So let me see, she just said, okay, she may join us. So I can talk a little bit, but it was again, what I understand in terms of, I'm not gonna go into the visions of human rights, but what I can definitely see is that there is not a universal understanding of the values of sport. There are the high level understanding of values of sport, but when it comes to the nitty-gritty kind of things in terms of even terms like gender-based violence, in terms of respecting women in the sport kind of environment, or even understanding what safeguarding means. What is safeguarding? There is no word in Spanish to explain what safeguarding means. And safeguarding usually in this context is more about health and safety, rather than all the different, such a big umbrella of issues like, as you mentioned, like integrity or abuse and harassment, maltreatment, so many different definitions. So this, by having this experience in Colombia specifically, through the work of my student, I can see how many diverse visions of sport are there, of the values of sport, and I understand of human rights in that perspective as well. Then I have a PhD student from Uganda who is researching issues of safeguarding in Uganda. It's more about sexual violence in Uganda. And there, even within the same country, there are so many different kind of tribes and perceptions of cultural norms. So even in that local context, I can understand that my student from Uganda and the student from Colombia, they bring completely different kind of lenses into what is sport and what the values of sport and the cultural norms. And then I have PhD students from Malaysia, two PhD students from Malaysia who are investigating. One was about women's participation in sport development and peace in deprived areas in Malaysia. And again, there you have so many different communities within Malaysia that there is no single Malaysian culture. So when we look at that, and we understand that even if we go into one country and one sport, there are so many different layers of understanding the values surrounding the sport, that when you open it up to different sports, to different communities, to different nations, you can see that I'm sure the visions of values, I'm not going to say specifically of human rights, but of values, are so many to capture them. And then the visions of human rights, that they should reflect those visions of values in sport, they become even more complicated to understand. So I'm not going to answer with very kind of, it could be very positivistic, let's say, to say that this is what I think, this is the visions here. What I have understood is that there is a very complex ecosystem of sport that we need to be aware, that is very multi-layered, is very diverse, and we need to find a consensus. We cannot say that it's impossible to agree on some kind of values. That's where the human rights came from. It's the same in terms of safety. We cannot say that we cannot agree on some basic standards of what is a safe sport for our children. Okay, so it's about striking the right balance between cultural norms, diverse visions of the values of sport in the different kind of cultural complexities, but also through these negotiations to agree to some kind of consensus and standards that make sense to all, because are human standards. It's not an easy kind of balance, to be found. But I hope this kind of answers partly your question, Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria and Dikaia. You want to say something, Victoria? No. Okay, so we have three people.
Okay,
Gabriel, Larissa, and Augusto. Gabriel, it's your turn.
So thank you so much, Professor Dikaia. I don't know if it's a good pronunciation, but
very good.
Thank you so much. It's a big pleasure have you with us. My question, I think you already talked about this, because the idea of the Olympic paradox caught a lot of my attention, especially because the idea that the Olympism was structured by a Eurocentrism view, by a Western-centric vision, especially. And for me, it bring a very big challenge nowadays in the history of the Olympics, because especially the dimension of human rights, because as you said, human rights have different meanings, have different interpretations. So I'd like to know your opinion about how we can create policies IOC, especially the IOC, can create policies to broke. I don't know if IOC really wants this, but to broke this Eurocentric logical, to broke these perspectives and advance for a multicultural human rights policies, something like that. My question.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you. And let me also welcome Catalina, that I saw that she joined. I mentioned before, Catalina from Colombia, my PhD student. Hi, Catalina. Do you want to say hi before I start replying to Gabriel?
You're muted.
You're on mute.
And, hi, everyone. Very nice to...
Português, no?
Eu falo português um pouquinho, mas faz bastante que eu não falo. Muito obrigada. Desculpa que consegui somente ligar agora, mas gostaria muito de também começar bater o papo com vocês também.
And Dikaia has a great Portuguese too.
I didn't know that.
Oh yes, my next paper will be written in Portuguese.
Yeah, she greeted us this morning. It was
Bom dia. And Catalina, just with this opportunity to say once more, many congratulations, Catalina, that she finished her PhD. So it was fantastic, and I thought she would be very busy because I know she's also working. That's why I didn't want to overload her with coming to us here today. But I think it's fantastic that she could join and she can connect with your Olympic Studies Center and with your work in Brazil. So to go back to Gabriel's question is the fabric of the Olympic Games from the ancient Olympics to the modern is very much based on Western on Westernization. It's a Western logic. And it's very interesting that I'm saying this. I am Greek. And it's very interesting how Greece, my work was a lot about, I have written papers on Greece becoming the source of inspiration for Coubertin. And it's very interesting how, because of political situations, sometimes Greece was considered to be West, because it was a source of inspiration and of influence, more about influence, to the elite, Western kind of bourgeoisie at the time, and aristocrats. And then, whenever it was not convenient for the Greeks to be in their part of it, they became the East. So we were the kind of more Eastern. So it's very interesting how even Greece is many times with one foot to the west and one foot to the east in terms of politics and representation of Greece in the history of sport. But the dominant representation of Greece in the history of sport is the West, is the cradle of Western civilization. But why I'm saying this is because the International Olympic Committee has been very much rooted into these Western ideals and values. It is based in Lausanne. It had mostly Western white males as presidents. So now, how do we move to a different kind of situation is the fact that we have now a president who is a woman, even if she's white, she's African, is part of this rhetoric of switching into something that is non-Western only. Now, if it is only management of image, or if it is a true reflection of change, I think it will take some time to see. But because of the rising power of non-Western kind of nations, there is more and more pressure for a balance within the IOC. So even if it comes from the goodwill of the IOC, it comes from this kind of a very much kind of negotiated power battle between the West, non-West kind of actors that are reflected into sport as well. So how this will be reflected in equality, in all these kind of things, we will see. But I think the IOC has come a long way since how it used to be, but there is still further to go. And I know that at least until recently, we had one of our PhD students, Kirsty Barrows. She used to work for the International Olympic Committee, and I know that she was very much committed into a bottom-up approach in say sport, into a kind of a cultural shift that was very much non-Western, and I want to hope that this is something that reflects the works that are happening, you know, in more widely in the IOC. So this is my kind of feel.
Thank you, Dikaia and Gabriel. Well, we will be pleased to have Catalina talking to us someday about her work.
Absolutely, I'm sure she would love to. And
we will invite you to the Bate-Papo.
Yes, yes.
Good.
And
so
it could be in Portuguese.
Maybe.
I'll be very happy to join. And I think it would be also like even linked to the type of ideas that Gabriel is already bringing as well, with the need of a different lens to analyze how the universality of sport and the Olympic movement is bringing to people who are not from the same continent, who doesn't speak the same language, and who might have different perspectives, needs, and realities.
Thank you. Now it's Larissa's turn.
First, thank you, Professor, for the presentation. How do you see the role of social movements such as the Olympics LA? Can they really change the Olympic systems, or do they end up becoming part of the same system they criticize?
That's an excellent question, Larissa. Thank you. I don't know how, you know, for the future, how those social movements can shape the future, but I can tell you that definitely they shape the past. They have not been taken lightly from the people in power within the Olympic ecosystem in the past. So, for example, we had, you know, if you go in the history of the Olympics, Alice Miliat, who wanted to introduce the Women's Olympics. And always the IOC, as a public kind of rhetoric and image, is a very composed, very balanced kind of organization that does not feel any threat, is very resilient.
Ups, acho que ela caiu também. Ou desligou sem querer de novo, né? Vamos esperar um pouquinho. Amanda, eu vou tentar traduzir sua pergunta com base no que você me mandou no meu WhatsApp, tá bom? Aí a gente vai ter Augusto e Amanda, e aí eu acho que não dá para estender muito mais, por causa do horário dela e do meu. Também tem um compromisso às 11. Vamos ver se ela volta, né, Catalina?
I'm trying to check on her as well, mas ela não respondeu ainda.
No problem. So you're living in the UK?
Yes, I'm living in the UK. It's been 3 years. I was going to show you back. I don't know if you can see your map. It's inverted.
Brazil's map right behind her.
It's my decoration. I have Brazil in my heart.
Well, good. Have you ever been in Brazil?
Well, yeah, I lived in Brazil. Estudei na USP. Estudei na USP. Fez um intercâmbio faz 12 anos já, mas eu adoro o Brasil. Fui também para 2014 para a Copa. Trabalhei com a FIFA, fez voluntariado no Recife, eu esteve, e também em Fortaleza. E agora...
Eu também. Você trabalhou na onde, Fortaleza?
Não,
lá,
não acredito.
Lá.
Eu fiz lá. Tinha um monte de gente. Eu fiquei com 2 amigas.
So Dikaia is back.
Legal.
Sorry, it crashed again. But until what point could you hear me?
you're saying that social movements just certainly changed the past, and then you're almost approaching to the end of
You were just explaining about Alice Milliat.
Alice Milliat, yeah.
So, yes. So I was saying that the IOC always presents a public image through the history of a resilient organization that can always overcome struggles like First World War, Second World War, COVID, anything can be overcome. However, from my work, when I was looking and digging into the key stakeholders' correspondence of the Olympic movement in the past, I could see that they were seriously scared and worried and concerned about these rising movements in different times of history. So with the Alice Milliat, there was correspondence about worry about these women's Olympics, that they can put a threat into the kind of mainstream Olympics. Another event was like there were the Spartakiad Games, and there were the Worker Olympics, and I have so many a lot of correspondence between different people within the Olympic movement and the president, saying, how can we make sure that we kind of control these movements and they don't hijack the IOC? You know, how can we? So there is a lot about this, and also about regional games, about the Asian Games. How can the regional games be under the umbrella of the Olympic movement rather than doing something that is separate? So all this kind of either social, whatever kind of movements could put a threat or a challenge into the mainstream system and culture of the Olympic movement. The history has actually shown us that there is always some kind of like keeping an eye on Human Rights Watch, you know, with China, with Beijing Games. This activism, because in the past it was it was activism. I mean, the Women Olympics, we can talk a lot about activism. Alice Milliat was an activist. All this is not peripheral. It's there, and it can actually put pressure on the mainstream system. It may never be admitted, but there is always some kind of discussions and concerns within the circles of the movement. Sometimes more, sometimes less. But yes, definitely this social, and depending on the dynamic of the movement, if it is genuine, if it is well organized, well orchestrated, if it is the people involved are, you know, have a genuine interest and are knowledgeable, and they do it in a rigorous way, it can be taken seriously. If they are kind of random, just to make some noise and not well kind of intentioned, they will just shrink and be kind of, you know. So, but any kind of, this is part of the society in terms of like having an interplay between dominant voices and social movements where they want to fight for some important kind of rights. So this is my answer to that.
Thank you, Dikaia and Larissa. Now it's Augusto's turn. The last question came from the chat. If you have some time, Dikaia, I'd like to finish with the question in the chat. There are also people want to greeting you for your work and mentioning how they applied your work to their own research.
Oh, thank you. It's always
so if you have some extra time, we can finish like that. Augusto, then the chat question, and finally some people want to greet you. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, Augusto.
Hi, Dikaia. My name is Augusto, and I am master's student in UFV. First of all, thank you so much the opportunity to listen to you. Okay, my question is similar to Amanda chat. In the chat, you mentioned issues such as gentrification, violence, human rights violations, sport washing. Considering the current political climate in the USA, you strong polarization and the anti-immigration rhetoric, racial tensions. Do you and the tensions between the federal government and the political leaders of California and the Los Angeles? Do you see LA 28 as an event that might expose the limits of the Olympic human rights discourse? How do you interpret the future LA 28 games in relation to human rights?
Yes, this is we need a whole session to go through this, because this is in terms of goes back into the question we had before. Can you separate sport from politics? Can you have a sport event that happens in isolation from a government politics? And I think not. So you need to approach it in two different ways. First of all, you have internal issues within the nation. Either it's US, it is Greece, it is the UK, it is China. Whatever country you have, there are political issues that are internal, okay? And then you have the political issues that this country has in external affairs. Every country, every nation, they do have this kind of, where it comes sport diplomacy, it comes the negative side of sport diplomacy, which is sport washing. So you have one host city that has to deal with internal politics, has also external affairs, and then also is hosting a sport event. So this sport event, when it's hosted into this kind of a host city, by definition, it actually is affected by all these kind of not only triangle of politics, but multitude of political influences that are taking place and are at play. So when we talk about the US, I'm not an expert of American politics to go into depth here, but there are several issues internally, externally, as we had with France. We had a lot of protests, for example, in terms of the Olympics, lots of social protests, lots of social internal politics issues with the strikes of the underground just before the games, all these kind of things. So how every games challenges human rights. I think every single games can challenge the human rights, either for labor issues, for safety issues, for surveillance issues, and not only nations that are kind of in the public eye and public conscience are democratic, Western, neoliberal states. There are also kind of states, and I will give the example of France, that they had been extremely scrutinized for the violation of human rights through the technologies of surveillance that they had to actually apply during Paris Olympic and Paralympic Games. So whether the LA Games will push the kind of challenges and limits of human rights more than other games, I really don't know whether this is going to be the case. What I know is that every games challenges human rights in different ways. And we had the same in London 2012, gentrification in Stratford. The same in the sense of challenging human rights. The way that the legacy was such a big priority of London 2012. It was almost the very first games that they had so much of investment on legacy, not only financial, but in terms of people's investment on legacy. So those kind of issues of human rights are in every Olympics, and I'm sure we will have a lot of discussion to do about the next editions of the games.
Thank you, Dikaia. Well, Amanda's question on in our chat here, she was asking if instead of shaping international image positively with US and Donald Trump, if we can have the opposite effect as well, like more criticism and exposure of human rights violations in the USA. So it's very well related to
they're related.
Yeah.
And I can say that because I'm also wearing the hat of the Global Esport Federation, we have the Global Esport Games taking place in LA on this December. And there are all sorts of different discussions about how this will be approached, what kind of activities to happen. But good things are happening for the LA Games, Global Sport Games, with participation in Invest for Children, participation for the local communities. So yes, we need to wait and see how things are shaping. But I just want you to also reflect that many times there are countries or host nations, not only of the Olympics, but of any small or bigger events that may be seen as not in the radar of human rights, to say, oh, this is a safe space, but still to have challenges of human rights when you zoom in and see the dimensions of a sporting event. So I don't think that any event is immune from being prone to actually not do completely justice to human rights. So we need to always be very alert and as researchers to be very open-minded and knowledgeable, and to really combine research together with social media, public media. Never believe totally what you read. Always do your research and always use academic literature as your guide as well.
Thank you, Dikaia. I know Carlos has something to say to you.
Yes.
Yes, I don't have a question. I would just like to say that it is a great honor to meet you, because I have already read several of your works, including your doctoral thesis and 7 other texts of you.
Oh, thank you.
I cited some of them in my research, which focus on Pierre de Coubertin and the early Olympic Games in relation to international exhibition, imperialism, and modernity between 1894 and 1912. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos, and I'm glad that I did not disappoint you today, because sometimes you read an author and then you you meet them, or they talk and they say, "Oh, wow!" I'm glad that I did not disappoint you, and you enjoyed the talk today. But it's for me, speaking to audiences like you is exactly part. This is that's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. So thank you so much for your interaction, for your commitment, your openness. Totally loved it. And commitment now, Catalina is not here. I'm committing for her. She's gonna come to your group and speak in Portuguese, and I'm sure you will love it. You will enjoy it. Bom.